Calling to order the special meeting of the Euclid Board of Education. Today is Monday, May 20th. We are meeting in the Fordyce building. I say that for the camera people. If you should please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I have to say it was wonderful hearing the little voices saying the Pledge of Allegiance, because usually it's all adults here. Okay, call the roll, please.
Mrs. DeAngelis.
Here.
Mrs. Lysy.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Mrs. Sudar.
Here.
Mrs. Van Hoen.
Here.
All members are present.
Okay, we have some recognitions this evening. I'll turn it over to Mr. Bell.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, I'm excited to have three resolutions that I'll be reading this evening, and to do that, the board president, Mrs. Van Hoen, and myself will move to the podium and to make these announcements. Ladies and gentlemen, what I want to do is I'm going to read resolution. The first one is with the American Legion, and this resolution reads, whereas the American Legion Buckeye Boys and Girls Day will be held this summer at Bowling Green State University and the University of Mount Union for girls, and whereas these students are sponsored by the Euclid American Legion and the American Legion Auxiliary, and whereas students who participate learn about city, county, and state government through hands-on operations of the democratic form of government in the organization of political parties, now therefore be resolved that the Euclid Board of Education extends congratulations to the following 11th grade students who have been selected to represent Euclid High School at this year's Buckeye Boys and Girls State. And so what I want to do this evening is I'm going to read the names of the students and have you all come up. And then once you come up, you will shake the board president's hand, Mrs. Van Hoen. And then I'd like for you to remain, and we want to recognize the parents of the students that are here. First is...
Go do the motion. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Sudar, second.
Second.
Mrs. Lysy. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Lysy.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mrs. Sudar.
Yes.
Mrs. Van Hoen.
Yes.
Mrs. DeAngelis.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Now I'm going to call the students up. First is Jeremy Atkins. Timothy Perkowski. Marie Starks. Crystal Brennan. Megan Gidley. Emma Reeve. And Samantha Lysy. I'd And I'd also like to have the parents of these students please stand, be recognized. You all have a great time. Congratulations on your selection. The second resolution that I'll be reading this afternoon is for one of our staff members, and it reads, whereas the Greater Cleveland Council of Teachers of Mathematics is an organization of mathematics professionals committed to improving math education in Northeastern Ohio, and whereas Florence Masella, math teacher at Central Middle School, was one of 4 area middle school teachers recognized by the GCCTM as an outstanding middle school mathematics educator, now therefore be resolved that the members of the Board of Education extend congratulations to Florence Masella for being named Outstanding Middle School Mathematics Educator in recognition of her talent, dedication, and success, and for her commitment to education has brought honor to herself and to the district. And before I bring her up, we want to have the board recognize this resolution.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Sudar, second.
Second.
By Mr. Smith. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Sudar?
Yes.
Mrs. Van Hoen?
Yes.
Mrs. DeAngelis?
Yes.
Mrs. Lysy?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
And thank you. So at this time, Francis Masella. And I want you just to stand for a minute because one of the added pieces to this is I'm going to ask Principal Mike Manell to come on up and to give you a little bit more context as to the impact that this educator has on Central Middle School. So Principal Manell.
Thank you. First, I want to once again congratulate Florence Masella on this great accomplishment. Florence has been a math teacher at Central Middle School for the last 14 years. And for most of those years has been our department chair at Central Middle School, where she has led our department as well as the district with revising our curriculum, coming up with new assessments for our students, and really just being a leader of mathematics in our district as a K-12 perspective. Mr. Lysick and I run the math subcommittee for the district. In the last couple of years, we've relied heavily on Ms. Masella's expertise of working with our teachers and with our students. So not only does she get to touch all the teachers' lives, or all the students' lives that are in her classroom, but she helps all the other math teachers provide proper mathematics education for all their students as well. So congratulations.
I think I may have said Francis and I meant Florence myself, so just congratulations. The last resolution that I have this evening is dealing with our Chardon Hills 5th graders. Whereas the Cleveland Clinic Explorers program is open to students all over the area and also available worldwide with online classes, and whereas this year's event began with the Cleveland Clinic professionals giving a presentation on nutrition, after which Chardon Hills 5th graders working on projects in their art class based on the information learned, and whereas the photos of the completed projects and artist statement were submitted to a panel of judges, and 4 projects created by the following students have been accepted into the Cleveland Clinic Explorers exhibition, which is on display at the Great Lakes Science Center beginning this month and continuing throughout the summer. Now where be resolved that the Euclid Board of Education extends congratulations to the art teacher, Loris Gomasek, and these students for their success in the completion, which has brought recognition to themselves and to the Euclid City School District. It gives me great pleasure to Board of Education to accept this resolution for the Chardon Hills 5th graders along with their teacher.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Sudar, second.
Second.
By Mr. Smith. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Sudar?
Yes.
Mrs. Van Hoen?
Yes.
Mrs. DeAngelis?
Yes.
Mrs. Lysy?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
And so I'll call the students up again, and I want to have you all line up and just remain here, and then we'll recognize parents. Megan Gassez. Sophia Hatzmeyer. Katia Johnson. Annalise McLaughlin. Grace Stauffer. Rodney Barfield. Mario Freeman. Shayna Rhodes. Xavier Stovall. Martin Folsom. Shayla McInnes. Christina Seck. Xavier Minor. Darius Washington. Kumba Diouf. Isabella Johnson. And Madison Wright. I'd also like at this time to have the parents of these students please stand and be recognized. And I just want all of you to know on behalf of the Board of Education and your superintendent, we're very, very proud of you. Great job. Keep up the good work and continue success. So thank you. Thank you very much. Let's give them another round of applause. Also, before you leave, I'd also like to give just applause to the instructor because it happens with leadership, so I just want to make sure we give her a round of applause also.
Those of you with young ones who have bedtimes or homework, you're excused at this time. You can stay for the meeting. I don't want to rush you off, but if you need to go, that's okay. When I first got on the board, we had to learn with adults because it was too much. Okay. At this time, you have another presentation.
I do. Madam Chair, members of the board, I have two, and one that was listed and one that wasn't, and I just wanted to give you a quick update. I've asked Mr. Pat Higley just to give you a quick update on our new buildings and where we are with that, so I'm going to ask Mr. Higley just to go to the podium just to give you, I know there have been questions and I think the public asking questions of where we are with our new buildings. I just want to kind of give you an update as to where we stand.
Obviously, with the weather that has broken over the last couple of weeks, we've had an opportunity to get our site contractors back on site to complete that. That being the most outstanding piece of work that we still have to complete within the buildings. So they've been out for about a week and a half. I think it was 5/8, May 8th. They started at Bluestone, and Bluestone is nearly complete. There's some divots and some holes here and there, but we've been walking through with them. They've shot the grass and they've thickened the seed up where it was thin. They've poured curbs around the entire complex there. We've been working on some of the neighbors' tree lawns that we've had some complaints about, and we've been doing that throughout all the sites. But Bluestone is just about done. I'd say 90–95% complete. Moving on to Arbor, we've had the group out there over this past weekend. Again, they've made a lot of strides in completing the site work that they've had to do. We had some ruts on the soccer field that Mr. Hamilton, a member of the community, I think he runs the Euclid soccer organization, and we've taken care of that for him. He's been great help in helping us to identify some things on the playing surface there. We're looking at the streetscape. We'll talk, I believe, on June 3rd in a work session about the finances that we have available to move forward with the streetscape, and we'll provide the board that option, if you please, to go forward with that. Over at Chardon Hills, that's probably our furthest behind site. It was the furthest ahead. We had the least amount of work to do there, but it seems to be getting the least amount of attention. So we will be talking to that site contractor before the end of the week. Again, from a community standpoint, we replaced some weeping willow trees as you enter the site on Glenbrook, and the community member's name escapes me. I apologize for that, but we've constructed a new fence line to go along their property, as well as the weeping willow trees. We had a couple large sinkholes on the north side of Chardon Hills, and those have since been filled, and I'm sure the contractor will tell us they're waiting for that to settle again, and that's probably why they haven't been back out, but we'll push them anyways. And at Shoreview, we had a lot of work done this past weekend. The contractors were out Saturday, and again, they completed, probably 75 to 80% of what needed to be done. We're looking at adding a fence line around the playground. We've had some concerns from teachers and community members that it sits awfully close to the street over there, so we've included that into the cost report, and we'll be adding a fence line there. That Shoreview is the site where we have been getting the most community concerns. Our crew will be out this week with topsoil, grass seed, and some straw to fix all of the curb lawns along the Shoreview site. So everything's moving along. The commissioning at all 4 buildings, we're still working through the HVAC systems. At 2 of the buildings, the 2 Burt Hill buildings, the HVAC systems are working pretty much as they should. We had an issue today, more so user error than anything, within our library, and we were able to take care of that with the help of the contractor who controls our control software. At the 2 Lesco buildings, we're still working through some issues. We walked through today, and we created some set points in the buildings that are outside of the norm to try to cool the buildings off, so that we can identify the problem. We believe it's in the control software, so that's what we've kind of attacked first in trying to fix those problems. But all in all, things are coming together, and by the end of June, you'll see all the concrete work done. I think the biggest issue that we have with regard to concrete work is at the Arbor site, where we have that speed bump for a driveway, is again what they tried to sell us. But it's supposed to be just like the exit on the east side of the property, where it's a little bit more smooth than that. So we're working through that. Again, the contractors are pointing at the architects at the contractors, and we're just working through that. We have another HVAC meeting. It should be our last, I hope, a week from Thursday, and hopefully at that time we'll receive the commissioning of the buildings and everything will be operating as it's supposed to. At the last HVAC meeting, this is the last thing I think I have. At the last HVAC meeting, we talked about an extended warranty because the systems have not been operating as they should, and we were successful in getting that warranty stretched out through February for all of the buildings. So if anything comes up, we wanted to get through another cold season to make sure that these things were operating as they should. As of the end of this winter, I don't think any of us were confident that they were. The buildings were getting heat, but I don't think the systems were operating as they were designed to operate. So we'll get through one more season with that.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Higgins.
Yes, sir.
The second presentation, members of the board, Madam President, is our high school presentation, and I'm going to ask Assistant Superintendent John Schweitzer to set the stage for the high school team that will be presenting on what's going on at the high school, academic achievement, and also some of the other activities at the high school. Mr. Schweitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Bell, Mr. Vasic. Tonight I have the privilege of introducing Dr. Charlie Smilak, the principal of the Euclid High School. Dr. Smilak will be leading the presentation of the high school improvement team. Dr. Smilak.
Thank you, Mr. Schweitzer, Madam Chair, members of the board. We're very excited tonight to be here to present to you our school improvement plan and also some of our results from the 2012-2013 school year. I'd like to introduce Mrs. Hopkins. She's our 10th grade principal, and also we'll talk to you about the climate initiatives that we participated in this year. Ms. Thomas is our 11th grade principal, who has led much of our special ed, many of our special ed initiatives, and so grateful for them for being here as well. I'd like to start with a graphic that we have repeatedly showed our students this year. We thought that leaving the 2011-2012 school year, heading into this school year, we wanted to emphasize the importance of a high school education in a way that would take on a little bit more emphasis than maybe in the past. We felt that in the past we had recognized things like referral-free students and attendance, and those are important, but they're also sort of a bottom line. And so this year we really wanted to emphasize how a GPA is a critical ingredient in preparing students for an opportunity when they leave the high school, along with a 21st century skill. We said that the more impressive your records are in the bubbles to the left, then the better opportunity you're going to have when you leave Euclid High School. So that's kind of a mindset that we really have continued to try to work to instill in our students this year. One of the activities that we actually participated in, or asked our students to participate in, was having them actually create a vision statement to reinforce the most important behaviors to ensuring achievement. We asked them to identify behaviors that contributed to them accomplishing great tasks in the classroom, and from there we actually had them vote on the most common verbs. We came to focus, listen, try. And you may have, some of your high school parents, Mrs. Lizzie, Mrs. Sudar, you hear that as our kind of our tagline at the end of phone calls now. Euclid High School students, focus, listen, try. Every morning we choose a student, randomly really, from a classroom, and they actually say it into the PA. So as we're reinforcing a behavioral objective, I reinforce the behavioral objective. We actually have a student recite the student mission statement, which is focus, listen, try, as again, an effort to instill our culture of achievement. Our first initiative is something that's very similar to other initiatives that you've seen with other presentations from different schools. And that is that the most important thing that happens in the classroom is that we employ research-based instructional techniques. Our goal at Euclid High School is that we would employ research-based instructional techniques at least 90% of class time. And you see from our 853 walkthroughs that we did this year, we almost hit our goal. We had 88% of our walkthroughs. Principals not noted a research-based instructional technique being used, which meant 12% of the time it wasn't. I also listed up there several of the most common research-based techniques that you would see in our high school classrooms, practice being 29.3%, cues and questions at 16.6%, and note-taking. We use this data to inform our professional development. Since those are the most common strategies that we use, we ask our department chairs, our coaches, we spend professional development time making sure that we're doing those things in the right way. We also continue to emphasize the 5-step process and identified a protocol, which is a handout that you actually have, and so you can reference that. The 5-step process is not something new at Euclid High School, but just to review, we ask teachers to collect and chart assessment data as step 1. From there, they identify strengths and obstacles from the data. So in other words, areas in which students performed very well and also areas in which students struggled. From there, they identify strategies to improve upon the data. They set SMART goals for the performance of their classes and the performances of their students. And then they decide how they're going to analyze post-assessment data. So this is definitely a process that we have been participating in a couple of years, really. This year, I wanted to emphasize that our emphasis was really on monitoring this process. We felt that our teachers understood the process, that they've used it before, but that we really needed to start to give them feedback in terms of how they were using it. So administrators, we have a weekly meeting and we actually bring the forms that you see there, we bring them back from teacher-based teams, which are groups of teachers that teach the same subject. For instance, 10th grade English is a teacher-based team. So we'll take a look at the teacher-based team reports and provide feedback in terms of how well they're using the process. Department chairs and instructional coaches are also collaborating twice per month to assess teachers' work. Again, it's an initiative that we had already begun, and we felt that this year it was important that we monitored the implementation of that. We also implemented IE, and I think the board is familiar with IE. It's the intervention and enrichment period at the end of the day that provides additional support to targeted populations. You see the bell schedule that we use at Euclid High School. We went from 53-minute classes to 50-minute classes with an IE period at the end of the day from 2 o'clock to 2:30. We surveyed teachers as to how they felt IE was assisting, and you see that on the left-hand side, what fraction of the classes are actually assigned to IE. You see the plurality being 1/4 to 1/3, and that's really what we anticipated. We asked teachers to use student achievement data to identify smaller groups of students that they could work with on specific skills. And you see from the data that is occurring. Which of the following are you using IE to accomplish also? You see makeup work and tests being a commonality, individual and small group in intervention. Those would be your 2 bars to the left. And that's consistent with what we anticipated that the intervention and enrichment period would be utilized for. Allowing students to make up work, but also providing smaller group instruction, and that's the blue bar there. We asked students, we surveyed students about a week and a half ago to find out what they felt about IE, how IE had made a difference for them. And they believed also that IE has helped their academic performance. The plurality there was agree, but if you add agree and strongly agree together, you've got 61% of our students really feeling like it's made a difference for them. And we also asked them what they felt the best benefit had been. And again, they come up with similar to what the teachers had said, the opportunity to make up missed tests or assignments, but also the opportunity to work with teachers in smaller groups. And so those were the goals of IE, and you see in the data that the teachers and the students are feeling that has been achieved. Mr. Bell always asks us, so how do you know what you are doing is working? We added kind of a standardized measure this year in terms of how to measure the performance of our students, and these are the plan results. The plan is a preliminary ACT assessment, and we had all of our 10th graders take it in November, and you see our means compared to the national means. Certainly they're not at the national means, but we were actually relatively pleased with this data because we hadn't done this type of activity before. It was brand new for our students, it was brand new for our staff, and so certainly there was a little bit of a learning curve. We are analyzing the data from that in an effort to improve not only the systems that we use, but also the instruction that we deliver so that we can approach those national means. We also present to you tonight the 10th grade Ohio graduation test preliminary results. And I'm going to stand before you, Board of Education, and say these aren't the results that we wanted. We feel that we've undertaken many meaningful research-based initiatives, and we were confident that we would have higher results. But you see the results in front of you. The reason that this is a range There's several kind of rounds of data analysis that we go through and the state goes through to come up with a final number. But this is really the range that we are predicting at this point based on the preliminary data that we've gotten back from the state. You see our reading score stabilized, really stayed the same. Maybe a point, maybe a couple points increase. Our math scores, maybe a point or two down. Our writing scores definitely fell. We're disappointed in that. We're going to analyze why that happened, and we're going to work to improve it. Our science scores would be the same, with a slight decrease there, and our social studies scores also decreased. So we'll talk more about what we're going to do to address this data, but at this point I will stand in front of you and say this isn't acceptable, we're not happy with it, and we're going to continue to work to improve it. This time we're going to turn our presentation over to Ms. Thomas, who's going to talk about some of these special education initiatives.
Madam Chair, members of the board, as a part of our academic achievement and improvement plan, we focus specifically on our special ed students as far as enrolling them into a co-taught classroom, as opposed to in the past where we had a large number of intervention classrooms that were pull-out based classrooms, small numbers of students in the class. When we're looking at the data from the OGT in reference to our students' performance that went into co-taught classrooms, as you see, our students didn't perform as well as we thought that they would. However, it is our first year in doing the co-taught process. In co-teaching, it is defined as a special ed teacher partnering with a regular ed teacher, and they both teach lessons to both special ed students and general ed students or regular ed students in the same classroom at the same time. We have encouraged our co-teachers to go away from the more common approach of co-teaching of a one teach, one assist model, where you have the regular ed teacher as the primary instructor and you have the special ed teacher more as an assistant in the classroom that sort of just bounces around and supports the students as they need. As a part of that, we have also started to explore other various forms of co-teaching, such as parallel teaching, where we have two lessons that are happening in the same classroom simultaneously. For example, we have a classroom team of Ms. Humphrey and Ms. Smilek, who this is actually their second year of co-teaching, and they teach a science section. And we've gone into their room and observed them doing two different science lessons at the same time, strategically choosing the students that are in the groups that they are in, whether it's by ability level, performance, or the prior assessment. And they are learning basically the same lesson at the same time by two instructors. We've also focused on station teaching, where we have students rotating between teachers in the classroom, focusing on different aspects of a lesson. For example, I was in a world history class not too long ago, and they were focusing on the Holocaust era, and we had students doing an independent section in one portion. They were doing a book on tape of a book that was relevant to the Holocaust, and then another section they were watching a small video and being instructed by a teacher. So we actually had 3 stations as opposed to 2 stations happening in that classroom. As well as alternative teaching, where we have teachers delivering 2 different parts of the lesson at different points of the class. So you may have a large group for that, one teacher teaching primarily, and then they switch off at some point during the lesson, and then the second teacher comes in and teaches the second half of that lesson. We started with professional development with Dr. Marilyn Friend the summer of 2012, and we've also had 3 reinforcement sessions throughout the year, specifically focusing on the teachers that were going to participate in co-teaching for the school year. They have also had concurrent planning periods that have allowed them to do collaborative planning. As a result, we've also successfully eliminated academic assistance. And what we did was we started with a pilot of 2 sections in the 11-12 school year, and this past year we have expanded to 17 sections of co-teaching. So, how do we know if what we are doing is working? As you see with our numbers, when you compare, for example, in writing to 79% of our regular ed students passing the OGT, we had a passage of 36% of our special ed students, which was not a change. The data is not suggesting a change. And as you see in the other sections, there has actually been a small decline. But again, I suggest that we started with a pilot 2 years ago of 2 classrooms. We've expanded to 17 sections this past year. So our goal is obviously for those numbers to increase and to improve. And now I'd like to introduce Ms. Robin Hopkins, who will talk about our climate.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. We focused on 2 specific things this year when it comes to climate. The first thing that we wanted to reinforce and continue to do was our stand-up program, and to make it more about positive choices this year. The second piece of that was to indoctrinate this idea of culture of achievement into our students. And so I'm going to share with you how we did those things. First of all, when we talk about stand-up, this year we began with student ambassadors. We called them stand-up ambassadors. They were recommended by their teachers, and they had to have a GPA of 2.5 or higher, plus they had to have a good discipline report. Those students were then extensively trained, and they went out to all of the elementary schools and both middle schools and presented to classrooms of students. They did activities in each classroom. They also were able to talk to the students about making positive choices. And so we were excited about that. It not only had a positive impact on the students that they presented to, but it had a huge impact on the ambassadors because they really felt like they were role models. One student told me that he was in the neighborhood and one of the kids ran up to him and said, "Do you remember when you were in my classroom?" And so those sorts of things make a difference. We also wanted to make sure we indoctrinated those same activities in the high school. And so we continued with our rally. And this year, instead of bringing speakers from the outside in, we actually had student speakers speak. Members of Euclid High School who spoke to our students about making positive choices, about being a role model, and just about even being different and that it's okay. And so that's one of the things that we did in terms of our rally, as well as we had a myriad of activities. Our stand-up week is one example. We had a video game tournament, we did a basketball tournament, poetry, art, music, all of those things were just a part of our stand-up week activities, and they were a great success this year. So how do we know that what we are doing is working? This year, if you take a look, you can see that since we implemented stand-up in 2009, 2010, the number of fights or number of referrals for fighting has dramatically decreased to the point of almost 50% this year from the initial year when we began. And so we do believe that stand-up for Euclid High School has truly worked. The other piece to this is indoctrinating the culture of achievement. And so one of the things that we did was we began having lessons once per quarter in an extended homeroom time where students actually looked at their GPAs and correlated their GPAs to various things or various opportunities that they would or would not have. You have in front of you 2 examples of those lessons that we did with our students, just showing them what are their college options. If you have a GPA of 1.7, then what type of college can you get into or not get into, versus if you have a GPA of 3.8. Those sorts of options were some of the things that we gave them. We also had quarterly celebrations for our students who had a 3.0 or higher. One of the things that we did was we transformed the focus from students who were referral free to students to focusing on achievement. And these assemblies were fun assemblies that we had. We had lunches for them. If you take a look at the picture, you'll see that's Dr. Smilek in a blow-up boxing match with one of our students. We had a cast machine. I had balloons thrown at me, water balloons, pies in the face. And so we just had a great time with them, just celebrating their achievement and focusing on that instead of focusing on maybe even just, referrals and discipline. The other piece is that we selected 60 students. These are students who had a GPA of a 1.5 to a 2.0. and they had any referrals that they had were basically passive referrals. These students were chosen by their principals, and they became a part of what we call motivational forums. And they were pulled probably about 4 times, I think, into various forums where we brought in colleges, local and state colleges, private colleges to come in and speak to them about some of their opportunities to try and motivate them. We brought various speakers from the community. We've brought in, community businesses came in and spoke to them as well. And so we try to motivate them to try, to think about what are their options and put before them various people or groups of people who were doing great things, and that maybe, if you do just a little bit more, maybe you could, be one, have some of these options as well. So now, how do we know that what we're doing is working? In terms of the number of referrals from last school year to this school year, you'll notice that all of our referral numbers are down. Class cuts are down, failure to comply is down, disruption are down. These, I think, we like to attribute a lot of this to a lot of the initiatives that we made in terms of school climate. We also would like to share with you our suspension numbers. Our suspension numbers have dramatically decreased since 2008, 2009, but there was an increase. If you notice, this school year, there was an increase in suspensions. And we would like to say that's because we truly began to align ourselves to the culture of achievement, making sure, focusing on keeping students in classrooms, getting them there on time. And so we were a little tougher this year. We were a little tougher on our expectations. And so some students, there may have been more suspensions this year than normal. But what we can say is that the climate at Euclid High School, the hallways, when the bells ring, students are in classes. They're where they're supposed to be. And last but not least, we talked about, student perspective on whether or not they believe this cultural achievement has made a difference. And 51% truly agree that Euclid High School is a better place to be, that they enjoy being there, and that some of the things, or many of the things that we've done have had an impact. And at this point, I would like to also share with you our honor roll statistics. You'll see that from 2011-12 to 2013-14, each quarter, our numbers were up a little bit from each year. And so again, focusing on culture of achievement, focusing on doing better at Euclid High School. And we're trying to get our students to see that they need to have, more responsibility in making sure they have the options that they want to have when they graduate from Euclid High School.
Thank you, Mrs. Hopkins. We want to talk now about what happens next. We shared with you the Ohio graduation test data, which certainly is the benchmark for high schools. It's certainly the most public and certainly a milestone that our students have to achieve to ultimately graduate. And we shared with you that we weren't happy with our results. And so it's important for the board to understand that we are very serious about our improvement efforts, and that effort has already begun. We want to shift the mindset a little bit from the macro to the micro. And what I mean by that is that we believe we've put into place the right courses, the right systems. From a macro perspective, we're doing the right things. What we need to work at is getting down to the micro level. And when I say micro level, I mean in each classroom, in each desk, in each student, are the right things happening. And one of the tools that will help us to do that will be Mastery Connect. This is an online student progress tracker, which will facilitate better identification of students and standards for intervention. Each teacher will have many different reports, but I chose one that just kind of emphasizes how easy it will be to see with the color-coded system when students are starting to need remediation. Certainly that's our first step. Is identification. The second step will obviously be continuing to use the 5-step process to build strategies to assist. But this will help us to facilitate that transformation from the macro to the micro to make sure that each student is getting exactly what they need to be successful in their classrooms. We have other initiatives that have already begun or that we are already planning. We want to expand the ACT prep assessments to include the Explore at the 9th grade level. And again, we already administered the plan, but it'll be an expansion by including the Explore next year. Our goal will be that Euclid High School students achieve national norms. And again, we believe that number one, through the procedures and the processes that we put in place for the testing environment, the preparation that we provide students, and certainly the instruction that we change as a result of seeing our former results will help to achieve that goal. We want to, again, continue the expansion and refinement of co-teaching. Ms. Thomas showed you the performance gaps between our regular education students or special education students. Certainly for us to make the gains that we need to make, our special education population is a critical group of students. And so co-teaching is a research-based intervention. It's the right process that we've invested time in. But we need to continue to see that through. There will be continuity in teams. One of the teams that Ms. Thomas referenced was Mrs. Smilek and Mrs. Humphrey. They're in their second year together. And so it's much easier in working together for a second year for the special education teacher to understand the content, for the regular education teacher to understand some of the interventions that the special education teacher has brought to the forefront. And so it will be much easier for our teams, our partnerships of co-teachers to participate in some of those research-based techniques, parallel teaching, station teaching, alternative teaching, moving beyond the one teach, one assist. It will also be a second year for students. We have to acknowledge that we moved students this year, 10th grade students, we moved them from intervention classes in their 9th grade year right into the regular education classroom. We have to acknowledge that that was a large leap in rigor. And what we're excited about for next year is that there won't be that same leap for 10th graders. They are in 9th grade classes in a co-taught model currently. And so that should be more of a seamless transition. And obviously we will continue to provide professional development. We've also added, along the lines of culture of achievement, we've also added dual enrollment classes for next year where students will be able to attain both college credit and high school credit at the same time in our classrooms with our teachers. We have classes that will run in math, humanities, biology, and political science. We also want to acknowledge that it's very important for us as an administrative team to monitor. I talked in an earlier slide about how this year we began to take systemic or systematic steps to monitor the use of the 5-step process. We have to continue to look for ways to monitor instruction and learning. We believe we are doing the right work. We have an instructional framework that we use. We talked about research-based techniques. We talked about 5-step process. It's the right work. How well are we doing it is a question that we will have to continually ask ourselves. It's also a question that we have to ask our teachers to continually ask themselves. We will use the 5-step process. We ask teachers to use it. The administrative team just got this data last week, but we've already started to begun brainstorming using the 5-step process to use student data to identify strengths and weaknesses of our structures and our procedures. We need to mobilize all resources to improve teaching and learning. Certainly our performance is how we attain credibility. One of Mr. Bell's goals from the minute that he got here was to improve student achievement. We share that goal, and these are the ways that we want to accomplish it. I want to close tonight with a tip of my hat to the class of 2013. I know several of you were in the audience last week when we had our senior awards, but we had a very impressive number of $4.7 million in scholarships earned to date. We also had acceptances into some very impressive colleges that you see in front of you, Case Western, Emory, Morehouse, The Ohio State University, Rochester Institute of Technology, UCLA, USC. We continue to provide outstanding opportunity for our students at Euclid High School, and we're very proud of our members of the class of 2013 for the way they've seized upon that opportunity. At this time, I would like to entertain any questions from the board.
Does anyone have questions for Dr. Smilek? I guess, okay, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. Mr. Smilek, excellent presentation. Slide 13, if I've got your pages numbered correctly, the school improvement plan, academic achievement, the breakout of the regular passage percentage and the special ed percentage.
This year or earlier than that?
Earlier than that.
Yes, this was actually, and we slipped a little bit in the presentation of this, this was last year's data.
Right.
And so this was what we used as an impetus to say that we needed to explore ways to improve the data.
Right. Again, I mean, I think that data
And for the benefit of those watching at home, it's a comparison slide, and please correct me if I'm describing this incorrectly, but it's a comparison slide of the percentage of students who do not have a designation who passed the 5 subject areas that, will get tested on as compared to the special ed passage, and this is for the class of 2012.
These are last year's 10th graders, not the class of 2012, but...
Thank you. But what we see is that the regular ed passage rate, again, for the 10th graders, for last year's 10th graders, that our regular ed population gets over the 75% hurdle in all of the categories except for science, which would be reading 83%, writing 93%, math 77%, social studies 85%, science at 63.4%. Have I regurgitated that correctly?
That's correct.
Yeah. And the special ed population is 27, 36, 24, 37, 24. And again, that becomes a bit of the challenge for measuring academic progress among our student population at the high school. And again, our special ed population, at least in the district, is about twice as high as what the state average is, yet the test and the results as reported in the papers and, don't take that into account. I think that's an important thing for our clients and our customers, that being the citizens of Euclid and the parents and students of Euclid schools, to keep in mind. So I think that's an important point to kind of be highlighted for the benefit of those watching at home. But my question is, the co-teaching model, which we've started this year, or we started last year?
It was a pilot last year with 2 sections of 9th grade science for the 11-12 school year. This year we had 17 sections between the 9th and the 10th grade.
So the notion that the co-teaching model that we want to be, as we've evaluated before with our walkthroughs, that 90% of our time we hope to be research-based instructional techniques. I'm hoping that there's some peer-reviewed research that suggests that the co-teaching model is an effective way to move achievement for the special ed population.
Absolutely. I mean, that is the be-all, end-all in special education now. It is no longer intervention classes. It is push into the classroom with an additional support as that co-teacher.
Do you know, I saw I believe it was a Washington Post article just on the topic of climate change and the human element. And I'm not going to get into that subject, but just as a comparison for my question. And someone recently, and again, this is a Washington Post article, and this is my point, so I'm not going to source it correctly, but someone is now looking at all the climate science research, and they've found out that 97% of all the research seems to indicate that there's a human cause to climate science, at any rate. Do you know how mature the co-teaching research is, and whether or not there's a significantly high, set of, how do we know that this isn't the flavor of the month in academic research is kind of where I'm driving towards, and how confident are you that the co-teaching model will, produce some special education results?
Well, that's a good question, Mr. Smith. And I can't really cite years, but I can cite that, the nature of the research is, quite expansive. And that the national expert that we have had come to work with our intervention specialist is a nationally renowned expert who brings results when she comes to show, that her techniques and her methods are successful with special education students.
And I can help with part of that, Mr. Smith, members of the board. Part of it is too, when you look at any of the international baccalaureate data, and you look at any places where schools have tried to expand or stretch students, what normally happens is that when you have students that have higher expectations, then it has a tendency then to bring everybody up to higher expectations. And that research is in, when you look at advanced placement and you look at some of the other courses. And it also, when you look at, and this is part of the Achieve data that I've looked at, when you look at why there are students that will perform better in college than they do in high school, part of it is because what happens is that they get into a situation where they become stretched. The interest is different, and so when you look at that model, it gives us the thought that if we're able to connect that to a higher level for all students, then it, through deductive reasoning, they're going to then be able to achieve at a higher level. The other point that I'll make is, when I was a principal and we had a freshman building, we had lower expectation, we had lower achievement when we had all of the ninth graders together. We had higher achievement when we had ninth graders mixed in with upperclassmen, because they could then conceive what they were looking at and be able to aspire, as opposed to not being able to have that as a way of expanding their academic rigor and their academic performance. So those are just some practical things that we've been able to determine and be able to look at. And so it makes sense, and when we looked at our pilot, we also saw that when those students were then infused with kids who were higher achieving, they tended to perform higher. So those things all together lead us to believe that if we're able to give our students a higher quality, that we're able to raise all academic achievement.
I can just add, I have a daughter. My oldest daughter is a special education student. She's profoundly deaf. She's been taught in the Mayfield City School System. Her resource teacher has adopted a co-teaching method for the last 3.5 years. So she started it in the second semester of her freshman year, and she has made drastic improvements. And she's been able to enter into a classroom of regular education children and students, and she's benefited from that. But not only has she, but other students have benefited with her presence there and her teacher's co-teaching method. There have been other students who are identified as general education children or students, but actually are sort of on the bubble between special education and general ed, and they have benefited tremendously from it. So my daughter went from passing no sections of the OGT test to passing all sections of the OGT test. And we made that happen this year, but it took us until this year, so for 7 years. So I give it time, because I think you'll see the results. Just give it some time.
And the last thing I just want to add with this is the fact that we in education have to constantly, as you deal with students, try to figure out what it is that's going to get them to connect. So I think the point that you might want to take away from this is the fact that we're not going to rest on whatever we have. We're continually trying to find new methods of being able to get our kids to achieve. So if something isn't working, we're not going to continue to do it. So we're exploring, we're doing different things. We're trying to do the best we can to anticipate what's the best method. But I think the real point is that we're going to continue to do things differently if they're not working. We're not going to let something not work and continue to do those same kinds of things. So we're examining that. I think Dr. Smilek mentioned the fact that his team is brainstorming in different ways. We constantly are doing that because we are not comfortable where we are. We know we've got some challenges in front of us, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure we give our kids an opportunity to be successful.
Thank you.
Okay, so you had 17 sections this year. Coach, how many are scheduled for next year?
I don't have the specific number of sections, but I do know that we're expanding the model to the 11th grade.
So it'll be 9, 10, 11.
It'll be 9, 10, 11. So yeah, the students would continue in that progression, and then the following year we would add it to our senior year.
Can I ask you how many of our students are taking advantage of the dual enrollment?
How many for next year?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to give you an estimate, and it's about 65, 5 different sections amongst the different subjects that we displayed up there.
I just want to say, I really, in the co-teaching that you have up there, the station teaching, when you were describing it, reminded me of some things that we used to do. But the main thing is you were giving the students the opportunity, depending on what kind of a learner they were. So if they were an auditory learner, they were hearing it. But if they were a visual learner, they were seeing. And that, I think, is really important. And I know that a lot of times at the secondary level, that gets lost. And it's assumed everybody learns the same, and they don't. And having 3 kids, I know that they don't. All 3 don't learn the same way. And so I'm really interested in this station teaching. I think that that's good. On the dual enrollment, for the general population, would you explain how it's different than the students who leave the high school and go to Tri-C or Lakeland?
Yes, actually, dual enrollment is essentially offers the same advantages in that you can earn, or you do earn credit at both Tri-C and Euclid High School, simultaneously. So in that regard, it is very similar to Cleveland State or Tri-C or Lakeland, which is known as PSEO, Post-Secondary Enrollment Options Program. The difference is that it actually operates on Euclid High School's campus, with Euclid on our campus, because they are invested in Euclid High School, they participate in extracurricular activities, they don't want to worry about the transportation to neighboring colleges. We will be able to offer them those options, the option to earn college credit on our campus.
And I think that that's important for people to realize. I know that a lot of times that transportation is a big issue on why people don't take advantage of that. And yet these students can eliminate some costs for their parents and themselves when they start college. So I think it's important, and I'm really glad to see that we're able to do that.
Madam President, could I just add one thing to that? I think the one thing that I think what Dr. Smolik said is very important, and obviously we have the student interest, but the other thing that I don't want anybody to miss is the fact that it also increases adult learning. Because now what you have is you now have adjunct professors at the high school. So whereas before, when you look at, and I mentioned the fact that you have students increasing their ability level, you also have teachers doing the same thing. So when you have adult learning, you have student learning, you have it all increasing at the same time. So it's really twofold for us. It's about the students, but they get their knowledge from the teachers, and if the teachers are increasing their knowledge, there's more of an opportunity for students to get a higher degree of knowledge, and it really just increases the rigor throughout the entire building. So it's a, when you talk about dual, it really has a dual purpose. There's a student purpose and there's an adult purpose. They both blend together to be able to get the building to achieve at a higher rate.
Thank you.
So just once again, I'm giving you a plug on TV, is that at Euclid High School, they will be able to take courses that are college equivalent, and so they can get college credit as well as the Euclid High School credit at the same time on our campus.
Yes, we're very excited about that opportunity.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam President,
any other questions? Go ahead.
Just a comment about the culture of achievement part that Ms. Hopkins had commented on or had presented on. I had talked to several students and they're very pleased, Ms. Hopkins, that you've moved the assemblies and the luncheons to concentrate on some of our higher achieving students. They really feel appreciated. My daughter would say to me that, referral free is not an achievement, it's an expectation in our household. So that's an expectation that clearly we have, and so for her to be recognized along with a lot of her peers on some of the greater achievements that are happening at the high school, I think that just is great, and it just again is starting to create higher expectations, higher levels of achievement, and I think that's the reason why we're having such success in our culture and our climate at the high school. So keep up the good work, and thank you very much.
I did have one thing on when you were talking about the IE, just simply from driving down to 22nd. It seemed like at the beginning when you were doing it that you didn't see as many students outside. It seems like right now, and I don't know if it's because it's at the end of the year and they're just catching up the kids. It doesn't seem like it seems like there's more students leaving the school and not participating in the IE.
Well, the requirement has been consistent in that you have to call at least 25% of your students, so that hasn't changed. Potentially, depending on the day of the week, for instance, Mondays of week B, because we have A week and B week, Mondays of week B, there is no IE because it's an extended collaboration period. Okay. Fridays, there is no IE either, so that potentially could be why you're seeing it. But the expectation hasn't changed, and we monitor that. Actually, we went from classroom to classroom and wrote down how many students were in class, and then we juxtaposed that with how many students were on the teacher's roster. We want to make sure that we are adhering to that 25% requirement. Our students need the assistance, clearly. And so it's not difficult to identify 25% of our students that need some type of targeted intervention, and we're very serious about making sure that happens.
Okay, good. That's good to hear. Thank you. And I think that's all the questions.
I just want to add one thing before Dr. Smolik sits down, because I just want to I want to point this out. This presentation is a tougher presentation because he got results. He has his results. The other presentations that were given to the board, they hadn't gotten results yet. So this is more of a targeted conversation. And quite honestly, as we look at things, we're not where we want to be, but we know what we need to do. So it's a little bit different conversation, and I just want to give the high school team credit because I know it was a tough conversation for them as they put things together, but there are a lot of things that are going on, and sometimes in order to move forward, you take a step back to move forward, and we have some things in place that we know are going to be effective. We've got the research to support that. What we've got to do is to continue to stay on our path to be able to do what we need to do. I think the second thing that Dr. Smiley pointed out that I just don't want the board to lose sight of is the fact that I talked about this when I first came into the district, and we've talked about it throughout the year, that how critical it is for us to get data early, to be able to get information early enough to make the necessary changes. And I think, as you saw on the slide, he pointed out with Mastery Connect and what we're trying to do, it will give us an opportunity to get to individual students a lot earlier. One of our issues that we're looking at with the high school is that you have so many students, you don't necessarily get down to that individual student level. Well, quite honestly, that's where we need to be. And we have to get down, and we have to almost create individual educational plans for kids that are struggling. And the only way you can do that is to know early enough. Our teachers don't have the information, our principals don't have the information at their fingertips to be able to do it. They're dealing with so many different things. They can't get that information when they need it to be able to make those necessary mid-course corrections. We're going to fix that. We're going to be able to get that and be able to do what we need to do. So we know we've got work to do. We're not hiding any of that. But I think what we're trying to do is to make sure that we put the mechanisms in place to be able to make this not a high school effort, but a team effort. This is a district effort that we have to be able to support them. And I was writing down when Dr. Smiley was talking, this right here, this kind of information allows us as a senior administrative team to have conversations about how we can support the high school. Because what you do is you now have specific information that is directed to each one of the departments and how we can actually get in and do some things. So it changes how we're going to address our issue. We know we've got work to do. We know we've got things that aren't where we want them to be, but we're trying to put together all of the information, all of the data, everything that we need in a simple fashion so that we can do what we need to do. So, I applaud the high school for having the tough conversation, and I like the fact that Dr. Smiley, we're not hiding behind anything. We're telling you exactly what we've got. We know we've got some work to do, and we're going to get that done. So I appreciate the presentation, and I appreciate the information that you shared. I just wanted the board to understand the effort and what they go through at the high school and all the different things. And in spite of some of the challenges that we have, we've got a number of positive things and that will culminate with graduation on June 9th. So we're really excited about that and all of the positive things that are going on at the high school. So, Dr. Smiley, I appreciate the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Bell.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board.
Okay, are there any items to come before the board? Thank you. Then I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Take a motion to adjourn.
Yep, so I moved by Mrs. Sudar, second.
Second.
By Mrs. DeAngelis. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Van Hoen.
Yes.
Mr. DeAngelis.
Yes.
Mr. Weisey.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Sudar.
Yes.
Carries 5-0.
We are adjourned. Wrote this down because I want to be short.